Hello. Hey, hello everyone. I hope I'm live. I hope it's working. Let's see here. Welcome everyone to our Sunday stream. And let me double check. I think hopefully it works. Let's see. Hello. I see. Can someone give me a thumbs up in the chat just to make sure it's working? Because on my end, it looks like it works. Okay. All right. Okay. See here. Hey, Ada from Netherlands. Welcome, Julia. Hey there, Julia. Karen is here. Welcome everyone to our Sunday live stream. Who of you who watched all the episodes of this series so far? This is episode 5 of our Fearless Watercolor series, and let me know in the chat who was here from the very beginning, who maybe joined episode 2 or 3 or 4. Just let me know. If you joined me from episode 1, let me know in the chat. Episode like 1, type 1. If it's from today, type 5. Let me know. Quebec, hello. Sunday's here. Torfi, hello. Torfi says all. Wow. Greetings from Australia. Wait a second. Isn't Australia isn't it like in the middle of the night or super in the, yeah, well, the other side is like, yeah, it's 4 p.m. Here. Sandy's joining from episode 5. So today, 5. Megan says it's my very first one. Yeah, so if you're just joining us, it's totally okay. It's not that we need to start from day 1 and only after you watched everything you can only then watch episode 5. Not at all. The series was really about creating a journey for anyone at any stage of where you are. So it could be maybe you want to get back into painting, maybe you want to improve your watercolor painting, maybe you just want to learn something new and paint. We really started up from the beginning, how to set up your mind and just even your supplies for success, how to start intentionally creating your watercolor painting. So we first also just broke into your watercolor supplies in a super fun and simple way, then talked about how to intentionally start putting paint to paper, or even just before you put paint to paper, how can you start planning it? We also did we had play with textures for lavender fields and just in general, seeing what's possible and having fun. So really, wherever you are at your journey, you can always pick the episode that speaks to you. And today we're going to paint a whole painting. Still, it will be small and simplified, but it's just a great way to just have fun, hang out, chat, and yeah, just have a good time. Let me see here. Welcome everyone. Amy says I'm from USA. It's 10 a.m. Eastern time. It's my very first one. Welcome. Diane Green, day 1. Wow. All right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Welcome everyone who's joining us. And so before I jump in, I also wanted to announce what's coming up next. So next Monday, so it's tomorrow, I start the registrations for my upcoming Paint to Paper challenge. Maybe some of you joined before, maybe it's your very first one. This is a great way for you to really get to the basics of watercolor, the foundations to the principles of watercolor. So really about how can you use watercolor the right way so you get consistent results? How can you, what do you pay attention to? What do you need to focus on to improve your watercolor paintings? What do you need to know and practice and focus on if you want to create your own watercolor paintings? Because everyone can learn watercolor painting, and everyone can, even if you're just starting from zero, if you have never done art before, you can do that, because it's really about really just focusing on the key principles and really the main things, and practice those and really pay attention to those, and then you can really create anything you want. And so many students went, I think at this time it was like, I don't know if it was, or I think 20,000 so far, I think. Last time I checked, went through the challenge, and so many were saying that it's like, was a game changer for them because they're really focused on what really mattered, really saw like what's possible. And now they're creating such beautiful paintings, and they're still learning with me in my courses or in my watercolor membership. But this is a great way to not only just put paint to paper if you're just collecting your supplies, but also really get to the bottom of watercolor and understanding watercolor, so you can create your own watercolor paintings with more confidence and ease. So the link is, you can see on the screen, and I can also post it here in the chat. I'm not sure if it's, hopefully it will show up on both ends. So check it out. The challenge starts May 19th. So tomorrow you can start joining. Right now it's just the notification list, so you actually know that's happening. So make sure you're joining the list so I can notify you. And yeah, I'm super excited because it's 5 days, and it's not just like 5 million tutorials to follow, but actually getting to the bottom of watercolor, how to actually use it the right way and make progress. But for now, let's jump into the painting today. So we have, let me see here, this is my desk. Some of you are familiar with that desk because we've been painting for the last 5 weeks, I believe. I don't know, yeah, I mean, it's episode 5. I've been going live like last 5 weeks. So today we're going to paint a lavender field step by step. And if you followed along, I really helped to or hopefully I helped you see that it can be simple and simplified, and you don't need to cover the whole paper in paint. You don't need to make everything complicated. You can really simplify the steps. And what I did, I'm using my watercolor paper. This is Sunless Waterford watercolor paper. It's cold pressed, but you can use anything that you have right now. Now, when you join the Paint to Paper Challenge, we will also talk more about like supplies and what to pay attention to, and yeah, how to get the best results. But you can use whatever you have, and you can also divide it into sections. So you can use tape. I use tape to divide it into 4 sections, but you can also just use a pencil and outline how much space you want to have. And I'll be painting here on the right side. Obviously you can paint whatever makes sense to you. I'm just using it here because of the reference on the left, but you can start wherever. And I will be filling this area. I just need to find a good spot to place it. And I will also use my standard watercolor set. We will just need a few simple colors. So you don't need 5 million different colors. You just need like the primaries. So you will need a pink, red, so a magenta, Galactic rose, anything that's like rosé. Ultramarine, which is usually in every set. Like ultramarine is kind of like this warmer option of blues in the watercolor set. So it's not this turquoise, more greenish blue. It's more like a warmer ultramarine. So ultramarine, if you have a standard set, you have probably 2 blues, and one is more like turquoisey, other one is more like yeah, just more blue, more reddish a little bit. And then we also need, you could use, for example, like the other blue that you have, like for example, cerulean blue hue. I have this here, so cerulean blue. You can also use phthalo blue, Prussian blue, something like that. Or if you have any like blue color that you have, like we will find it together. So don't worry, you don't need anything like specifically. But this is for the blues, and then also the pink color that I mentioned, and then we can also use some greens that we can also mix together, or we can also use what you have as well. So don't worry about having the perfect color. But let's jump into outlining some of the guidelines. Now, I'm not I wouldn't necessarily draw it perfectly, like use an outline and trace it necessarily. if it's like a simple project, you can just add like the horizon line so you know where you have the sky, where you have your bottom part of the painting. So it could be the ocean, could be a field, it could be anything. Just so you know what to paint. And then from there, you can decide, okay, where do I place the other elements that I need? And last week, the week before, we talked about how to plan out your painting, just from outline, like the composition, where to place certain elements. So if you joined us 2 weeks ago, you might have already tested out different layouts, different compositions, where you could where you want to place the building, how much space you want to give your field, the sky. And I decided I will just keep it like similar to the reference. Some of you were saying you prefer the building more on the right. You can totally do that as well. I'll do it on the left. And what I will do is I first use, this is my my rectangle, but you can also decide like, okay, I actually want to make it more narrow. And if you want to do it more narrow, you can also use tape, which I already placed here. And for example, just tape it down a little higher. For example, just to make the angle or like the frame slightly more narrow. So it's not so tall, but more narrow. So it's almost like these, like the Hollywood movies where they have the black lines on top and bottom. It just elongates the scene, or just like just you see a little bit more. It gives a different feeling, like you see a little bit more spaciousness. And also for fields, or even just for oceans, or if you want to capture the width of something, or just like the space, widening the frame really helps to bring out this feeling of spaciousness and the field, and just like the beauty, because if it's like tiny, like small space, it just feels a little cramped and you don't translate that feeling as well. All right, so what I'll do is then I will divide this into my rule of third lines. So meaning I divide this section into three horizontal sections that are, so I need just 2 horizontal lines, which are roughly spaced out the same way. So we have like 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, so 3/3. And 1/3 will be the sky. And then 2/3, so this is 1/3, this is 2/3, and I don't need a ruler for that. Just use just roughly. You can always like move it a little higher, a little lower. It doesn't need to be perfectly measured out. So this will be the field, because the main thing is kind of like the field. And if you want to focus more on the sky, we might want to give it more space. In this case, the field is our main focus. And the next focal point is our buildings. To keep it simple, I'll just use 1 or 2, maybe just 1 building, just to keep it simple. You can also use these kind of like small sections just to plan out your idea, plan out your painting, test out colors, and then use more space. Like for example, this is a really small section and it might feel a little too small. So if you feel this way, just use a larger piece of paper. For the building, then I'll divide. So this is our horizontal lines, and then we have also vertical lines. The same way, we want to divide the section into 2, or add 2 vertical lines, also roughly. So here, this will be so this is 3 sections, and the building, I will put here what the intersection is between this horizontal line and this vertical line. So basically, the rule of thirds is all about dividing your space that you want to use for the painting into equally spaced out lines, horizontally and vertically. And then those intersections, for example, here is the kind of like the thing that you place the most attention on, like you look at it mostly, because this is kind of like in this more, it's aesthetically pleasing, it's nice, and just like it feels more, just nicely placed. It's like more focal point, because sometimes if you just put the horizon line in the center, the object in the center, it just feels off. Like it's not as pleasant to composition wise. But again, this is only like just guidelines, quote unquote rules, but you can always like change it depending on what speaks to you. Like it's just like tools that you can use, and then you can tweak them to your liking, to what you feel it's translate your story, translate what you want to capture. And then here I will place the building. So the building is, you can see in the reference, if we follow roughly the reference, the building is almost like half the size. So it covers almost half of that space. So this is where I aim a little bit towards that. So if I make it too tall, like here, this building, like all the way up, it's just too small, too large. If it's really like all the way down here, it's too small. So I'll look at the reference, see, okay, this is roughly like half the height of that section, slightly smaller. So somewhere here, I will just add like a rectangular shape, like that. And this is not too small, not too large. And then on top, we can add our roof. Again, this is also a small roof in the back. Something like that. And you can also use your eraser just to, again, these are like lines that you don't necessarily need to see like super well, because we will have a darker background. And just like I will just edit simplify, like just we look at the building straight. We don't have like any, like we don't see much of the side. I just want to keep it very simple here, and from there you can make it more complicated, as in including different perspectives of, like you can see in the reference, you see the building, the left one more straight, and then the other one is slightly more rotated, so you see two sides of the building. But in this case, I'll just keep it with one like that. Yeah, I think that's for the practice purpose, I think this is enough. And then yeah, or we could also make it slightly small. I think maybe make it slightly smaller, maybe like this one. It feels like it's too much, like half of the space. Just make it slightly more flat here. And again, this is like when you paint smaller projects like that, you can always like test and then stick to one idea. And then when you finish the painting, you can always like look at it and say, okay, kind of like this went really well, this I like, but this one looks a little off. And then you can analyze, okay, why does it look a little off? And tweak that. Like you don't need to overthink and like worry about, okay, you need to really pick one perfect angle, perfect everything. Just paint with the idea you have and finish it, and then you can evaluate and see what you can tweak. Here, the next thing is we have the mountain in the back, and the mountain is really like roughly half of the, I would say half of that third, 1/3 of the, or like the sky area is kind of like divides it in half a little bit. So this is kind of like half of that space, but I don't want to place, I mean, we are the artists, we can change everything. We don't need, just because it's a reference doesn't mean we have to paint it. We can always change it. So I don't want the building or I don't want the mountain to be too much like behind. I want like right behind, like it's, you know, all the way here up. I think I'll actually move it slightly below, like here, and then it can go up like that. And I will roughly follow like that. You can also, of course, paint it behind. I can also, of course, test it. Like, for example, go all the way here, go down, and see, okay, do you like it that it's in the back, or do you rather put it below? So if I remove this line here and see how that looks, maybe this one goes a little here. So this will be an option. Or like I said, you can also move it in the back, so it's more like removed here and goes all the way down here. Maybe it makes more sense to put it in the back after all. So you can test it out. Like you can test, like I said, test it. And if you feel like, oh, actually I wanted to change a little bit different, just paint another version. We don't need to put so much like preciousness and say, okay, this is my only shot. This needs to be perfect right away. Like, no, it won't be perfect right away. This is just the way it is, just part of the process. And you can always change it. Like, it's just a piece of paper. It's not, you don't engrave something in like gold, like I don't know, some golden monument or something like this. Just a piece of paper. You can erase things, you can change things. And this also will be clearer, because if you overthink too much, you don't see it on paper what actually works and what doesn't. And then in the front we have like some trees here, so the trees will be slightly smaller, so we'll here somewhere, so just got the cloudy wobbly shapes roughly. And then the trees, so you have trees that are tall. So I'm just whenever I sketch trees, I'm just almost like draw a sound wave, but like a vertical. So basically you have like a line up and then just I wiggle down. And then here also 2 trees like that. And then maybe here. And again, we can move them around depending on what you prefer. And I like to use like uneven numbers sometimes, because I feel like it's even, it just looks off. And then windows are just dots. I will just add them as dots. We don't need to outline like rectangular shape or anything like that. It's really far away. You don't see much of that. So just like literally just dots. Let me check the chat here. Laura says, wow, so early, so happy to have caught you in real time, so glad you're sharing with us again. Tanami says, I just want to say thank you so much for teaching me watercolor. I've been watching for almost 8 years now. Wow, that's awesome. Yeah, like the last few weeks I was on YouTube, and sometimes like this is the frustrating part about YouTube. It's like you can be active every week and still somehow it doesn't show up to people, and then people are wondering, oh, did you quit, or like you come back? But I was posting last few weeks and I was live for hours, so it's kind of like yeah, sad that YouTube is like not showing things. Also the angle of my roof, I noticed, is a little bit too high, so I make it slightly like flat here to the side. So it's a little bit flatter angle, something like that. And again, this is just that doesn't need to be perfect. And then maybe also we can make the roofs like go to the side a little bit if you want. And then for the rows, we don't need to necessarily draw them out because we will paint with watercolors. But if you want to kind of like keep an eye on where you're placing the paint and things like that, of course you can draw them here on the paper. So if you want to follow roughly the reference, we can place the main, like start with one line. The one goes straight down. The other one goes here to the side. And this is where I think I cut this reference to that angle because last time I shared that it looks slightly off when you draw like these lines and they all cross or go into this intersection here, like in this corner. You don't want to necessarily go into the corner, move it a little to up or to the side. So it's again, it looks more like you capture that more in a pleasing way. It just looks like, can look a little off if it's goes into the corners. And then the other one is somewhere here. And we're using one vanishing point here. That's why when we paint our rows that are further away, they need to be almost horizontal again, because you can see how it goes down and then it goes all the way up, 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 and then until we reach again the horizon line. So don't draw your field when you paint don't paint the lines all the way up, like all the way up, because then it looks like a roof or something else. I don't know, that looks like that. You want to really just use one point, and all the lines lead into this one point, so the vanishing point. So on this also here, you can add one line that goes maybe to this side, and then could have another one that is like here. And again, just again, be careful that it doesn't go into the corner. I might need to move it, but again, with watercolor things will move, so we don't need to necessarily be super even with where we're drawing those lines. What you can also do, what helps is you can also prolong the lines here to on the tape, so you kind of like know where to aim. Also, like, it doesn't need to, if you don't draw those lines on the paper, you can just add those lines onto the tape, so then you could just aim towards those lines, and then you remove the tape, and then you don't have any pencils left. So this one goes here somewhere, and again, these are all, again, go straight like that. So yeah, it's kind of like this yeah, like all lines lead towards that point, and then we have the horizon line. Yeah, and then that's pretty much it. Like, you can really play around. You can decide where you have your trees, where you have all the other details. This will be more in the foreground and more like a little darker than the rest. And yeah, so this is pretty much it. I don't think, like, again, we don't need to necessarily capture everything perfectly like in the reference. I think one thing I'll move is just this tape slightly higher, just tiny bit, just so I have my angle slightly, I don't know if it was like somewhere like that. I don't know if it's the same spot that I'm just aiming for, but just so I have a little bit more sky, a little bit. I think maybe it was the same, I don't know. Just make sure it's straight like that. Okay. So moving, the tape is taping together. Oops. Okay. This hole we can tape down, so it's not, in case I add some paint or water here, I don't want that. Okay. And then, like, what I like to do is usually when I start, I like to kind of remove some of the pencil lines. But I want one thing I forgot to bring is my knittable eraser. Just 1 second. Oops. So my knittable eraser is this Faber-Castell one, and I like to kind of like dab over a few of those lines, because then it's not so visible, but I'm still seeing where I added my guidelines, and it won't show so much through through the watercolors, because once you layer watercolor on top, if it's just lightly, it's harder to erase, so you want to do that before you paint. Laura says YouTube doesn't always notify us even when we have the notifications on. Yeah, this is very annoying, but what can you do? Yes, that's why you always want to make sure you also follow, like, for example, on my newsletter. This is where I can reach more people, because YouTube is like, it has all the control sometimes. That's why if you want to learn more about like upcoming classes or challenges, or yeah, just join my watercolor membership. It's just the best way is to sign up to my newsletter. So when you join the Paint to Paper challenge, or if you grab any of my free watercolor supply lists or guides, you can join the list, or become a Mako insider as well on my website, and you get notified about anything coming up, because YouTube is not really reliable at all. All right, so first things first, we have our outline. Make sure you remove some of the pencil lines if you don't want them to be super visible. But like I always say, a pencil line is just kind of like, it doesn't matter if you see some of it, because I mean, if everything will be like white and maybe like very pale and light, and your outline is very visible, very dark, it might look like an outline, like it gives you a different feeling. and you want to make sure you can, if you don't want to go for a more like ink and wash type of effect, then I would always remove it. But if even if it slightly is visible, it's almost like the history of the painting, and it's like you see how, or others who will look at the painting, they will see, this is where you planned out this element, and okay, here the sketch was here, because it just tells kind of like more behind the scenes, and it's interesting. So don't worry, like it doesn't have to be perfectly invisible or something. Okay, so first things first, I don't know how many of you have a hairdryer on hand, so I'll try to find, we might need to use a hairdryer, so I'm not sure if you can organize one. Maybe I should have said it earlier, but with watercolors, we want to let it dry. If you paint on your own pace, you can also just let it dry. Or you can find ways where you can, okay, where do I start? So when this part dries, I work during this time on this part. So when this dries, I can come back to it. And in this case, we have different layers and elements. So we have the background, we have the mountains, we have our field in the foreground. And so some areas might still drying, others are still too wet. So having a hairdryer might help to just speed up the drying process, and so we can finish the painting more quickly. But if you don't have if you don't have one, you can just let it dry and then just finish it like a few moments later. Okay, you can just watch what I'm doing and then finish it. Sunny asked, why do I not using the whole sheet of paper? This one is just like I like to separate the paper in the smaller sections when I test out different ideas, test out layouts, compositions, colors, and just the idea. And I didn't want to, because the larger the piece is, the larger the paper, the more paint you need, the more time it takes, and also it might feel more overwhelming. So I like to start small. So if you've ever felt like overwhelmed by maybe like being afraid to ruin the painting, or oh my gosh, I have so much white space to fill, then start small and then graduate from this size to maybe this size, and then to the full sheet. You can just join the priority list of the challenge. This will be the easiest way. Here's the link to that. And you will be added to the notification list. And then you can decide if you want to join the challenge or not. But then you will be, you will sign up. All right, so I will just use my hairdryer, I think, just to speed up the drying process. And I will start with the sky, and you can see the sky is like this light, not 100% blue sky. We have also a little bit of clouds in there, so just white clouds, and they're more like wispy, if that's the right term. So really, really loose. And for that, I like to use, or this is what makes sense to use, is the wet into wet technique. I'll put back my tape underneath my paper so we have a slight angle so the water and paint can move down and not spread out in all the directions. I'll also use a flat brush like that. So this is a Da Vinci Casanillo brush. I have a guide to watercolor supplies. It's also, I think it's linked in the video description, if I'm not mistaken. And you can learn more about like what's important and what supplies to use, and how to actually know if you use good supplies or not, how to even look for it. So you can learn more about supplies because everyone has their own preferences. So, but it's important to know so you can confidently choose your own supplies that work for you. So this I'll be using to apply clean water, and it will be faster. Now for the sky, I think for this area, because it's like a small area, I might need to use a smaller brush. So this is a number 6 silver velvet brush. Even though this might be even too small, this is number 6. I think this will be good because the larger the paper, the larger the area you want to paint, the larger the brush should be, because Oftentimes I see people that use too small brushes for too large of a piece of paper, and then everything becomes just too streaky. That's why I'll be using this number 8 silver velvet brush. Also a paper towel in my other hand. And I'll start with preparing my colors. So I'll start with a little puddle of water in my mixing well. A little bit. So my brush is kind of somehow pinkish, so I need to clean it properly also first. So I don't have pink residue here. So a little bit of water. And I'll add a little bit of ultramarine. So my ultramarine looks like this. Let me swatch it here. This is my ultramarine. So already kind of like lavender-y. So this is where you see the difference. So I'll add a little bit of that into my mixing well. So just maybe just two dips of the tip of the brush. And then I'll clean my brush just to show you also my other color. This is my cool blue. This is a more tropical greenish blue. So you can see the difference. Like one is like this more almost like lavender, or almost like a little bit more purplish. This is very, very strong neon cyan type of blue. This will be too vibrant for the sky. So what I like to do is I like to mix those together. So my ultramarine with my cool blue. This is cerulean blue hue. And this is how it looks like to mix together. So it's not so red. It's also not too greenish. Also make sure that your paints are clean. So if I make sure it's clean, you can see now this is a little bit more like that. So maybe my blue was a little bit tainted by some pink, but this is the clean blue ultramarine. This is the cool blue cerulean blue hue. And then we mix those together. So cerulean blue hue with my ultramarine, we get this middle blue color. And this looks like nice. Like it's not too gloomy. It's not too tropical. It's somewhere like a nice blue sky. And this is what we can use. And what I'll do is I first apply clean water to that area. You can use a flat brush. You can use a larger round brush. And I'll just apply clean water all above my like 1/3, like over my sky, over my mountain, over my building. And this will be our base. So you can see it's shiny. Hopefully you can see it a little bit. It's a little bit of shine. You might need to apply it multiple times because depending on where you are, things might dry too fast. So rather apply multiple times just to make sure you have enough water on the paper. Again, it doesn't have to, you don't need to create pools of water. It needs to be even. But sometimes when you just apply once, it starts drying immediately, and then it's just like dry paper again. And then with this paint, so it's relatively dark now, but we have water on the paper, so this will dilute it a little bit. And I'll start at the top like that, and just loosely apply some of this blue color. I'm not aiming for a clean even wash, just like loose. Like you can see a little bit of white shining through. If you lost some of the white, you can also just clean your brush, remove excess moisture from your brush, and then just lift off some. So for example, maybe you want to have a little bit more white here. If the blue moves too much on top of the building, just use your paper towel and remove the water from the paper, from the paper on the from your watercolor paper. If it moves over your mountains, it's totally fine. Like it's okay. Just keep an eye on your building. So you can just literally just apply or press down the paper towel on top, and this will remove the water, and the pigment won't travel there anymore. On top, you can also add more if you want, like to darken some areas if you want. It's just like sometimes if it's too dark and the blue color is a little too like more ultramarine, it can look very gloomy. So I don't want to turn into a gloomy painting. So I need to keep an eye on the the shade of my blue, and also that it's not too dark. And we also don't want to over perfect our sky, because sometimes we tend to tweak and then move everything and make everything like try to adjust it, and then it just overworked because the colors don't look as freshly applied, and also it just like doesn't look as flowy, and yeah, just like the first, like when you do like the first wash and you paint like loosely without overthinking, it always looks better than when you try to control every single brush stroke and every single millimeter on your paper, and then tweak, because it just loses this intuitive flow, kind of like I don't know what's the right word for that. So yeah, try to kind of like keep yourself in check, or rather your hands in check, so you don't try to over perfect everything. Now the other thing is, usually with watercolors you kind of like start from light to dark, from larger areas to smaller areas. In this case, the smaller area, or like the larger area, would have been the field, but because it's on the bottom, I don't want to paint this and then come back on the sky and kind of like worry that I touch my field. So I start from top to bottom. We can then move on to painting, for example, the mountains and the greenery and things like that, the building, or we can also paint the field. But I feel like with the field, we want to use the regular, like the natural drying stage, so we don't want to rush the drying process. That's why I rather let it dry naturally without a hairdryer. This means that I need to actually either let it dry completely on its own or use a hairdryer. And before I do anything, I also want to kind of block in the colors for the building as well. So the building is like, again, we don't need to follow the reference like perfectly in color code, what kind of brown, orange, I don't know, something that is. We can also just roughly aim for that. So we can see it's like a brownish, reddish color, and we can look for it. So if you have something similar, it could be like a yellow ochre, raw sienna, it could be a burnt umber or burnt sienna, like super watery. You can look for that. So this could work. I think this looks nice. So this is a raw sienna with lots of water. This could be like a nice pale version. And for the top, for the roof, you can use like just more pigments, for example. And you also have, and then like just a little bit more, darkness in there. And then for like some darker details, you can then go in and add like burnt umber, for example, like some chocolate brown color, just more pigment than water. And then this could be it. Like we don't need to do all the details now. I think I would rather block in the main color, and then we can come back to it later. So again, here I will just use my small brush and apply the water all the way on my building. Again, just like even, and then with a little bit of my raw sienna, maybe I can add it to my mixing well, so just to make sure it's not too colorful, too pigmented. And then I just block in that color here. Again, it can spread out a little bit over the outline, as long as it's just very pale, because then it's easier to kind of build up depth in here. Maybe some more pigmented raw sienna or yellow ochre, anything. I just noticed that my face covering the raw sienna, but the raw sienna is just like this yellowish brown color, like very earthy. You can use that here and just also added on maybe on the some details here, just a little bit like the roof, just pigment on this damp area, just like that. This is just pigment like straight from the pan, so very creamy, and I just apply it to this damp area of paper after I applied this very pale raw sienna solution. And I think that's enough. Like, there's nothing more we need to do. Like, you can add a little bit to the windows, but I think this is, at this point, it's just, we don't want to go too much into detail because this is not the stage to do that. All right, so once we block this in, we can start using the hair dryer and blow dry it. If you don't have a blow dryer, just let it dry naturally and then follow along once it's dry. Let me see here. I will mute myself for a second and blow dry everything. Okay, so it might not be 100% dry, but it's pretty close. So Hadi's asking, I had a question. I was wondering if watercolor paintings still have a future with the advent of AI and digital art. I like watercolor painting, but was wondering if I can create a career out of it, as I'm still a beginner. I would love to hear your thoughts and believe it will be great if you can also create a YouTube video on the same. Yeah, like there's so many, like before AI, there was oil painting, there was acrylic, the drawing, photography. Before people were painting and then photography came in and people who were painting was like, oh my gosh, the photographers are taking our job now because everyone's using cameras. But no, like we're hundreds of years later, or how much it's been, like have no time sense anymore. But like there's still everyone, like everyone has their own preferences. Like some prefer photography, they love photography, and others are into oil painting, others in the watercolor, others are digital art. Like you have different things. You have digital artists, like you have video games, you have designs, watercolor painting or oil painting or anything like that is another just genre. It's like there are comedy movies but also thrillers. It's not like because now thrillers are popular and comedy is not popular. Just like it's just different things, and AI is just a tool, and it's only as good as the input that you put into it. So I wouldn't be worried about people are still painting with oils, even though we have photography for so long. So just think about no matter what happens, no matter what tool is invented or introduced, switch it to not from will it be not not used anymore, oh my gosh, it's like negative, blah blah blah, but more like this is what I learned from one of my mentors. She was saying she learned this from her mentor, and he was saying what does this make possible? Like what does it make possible? Because if something is now AI everywhere, like people will crave like actual artists putting paint to paper, because they will like, oh my gosh, I hate, like if you go to Facebook, you see so many AI generated images, and you're like, oh my, why was Facebook showing me this? I'm not interested in that. And people might want to just like seeing more like traditional paints and colors and things like that. You can still use AI to like maybe create like an idea for a concept, but not just like to spit out a painting and then, okay, this is the art I created. I just can use it still as a tool. And then, like I said, and Sandy was also saying, it's just a different form of art. There's room for every type of medium. So yeah, don't worry about it. Just think about like what does it make possible for you and for art in general. All right, so we have our small building, we have our sky. Now we can work on our mountains in the back, and we can reuse what we have already. So we have our blues, so like the mix of the blue sky. And what we can do is we can just mix in a little bit of green into it. So as just a reminder, this is how this blue looks like. So this is this blue. We might need to add more because it might be too watery, but we'll see. I will use, you can use either add a little bit of yellow to it or use already pre-mixed green. We can try and add, let's assume we don't have these green colors that I have here. What we can do is we can use cadmium yellow or any other warmer yellow. So not lemon yellow. So here, for example, I have two yellows. One is lemon yellow, one is cadmium yellow, which is a slightly more warmer side. And if I use that with my green or with my blue, it's like we turn the blue into a green, and it's not too vibrant. It's not too muddy or anything like that. It's just a slightly more muted version of that of a green. So I also have a guide on color mixing where I talk about how to achieve vibrant colors and more muted colors. But I will also talk about this in my upcoming challenge, Paint to Paper challenge. I shared this link before in the chat, so you can also join that, and we'll talk more about it there as well. But it's really just about learning like what colors go together. In this case, I'll just reuse the mix of my blues, so ultramarine and my cerulean blue hue, so warm and cool blue, and then add a little bit of my cadmium yellow to it. So it still is a more bluish green, something like that. So I can show you the cadmium yellow on its own. So cadmium yellow is like that, very vibrant. And then if we mix in our ultramarine, for example, it's a more like a foresty mix. With our cool blue, we can mix in that as well. It's slightly more greenish and more vibrant. A little bit more yellow to it. You can see how vibrant it is. If we add a little bit more water, it's slightly more calmer. If we add a little bit more blue to it, it turns a little bit more bluer. So we want to go for something like a more bluish green. So that's why we have more blue than yellow. And then all we can do is either you want to keep it simple and apply it wet on dry, or what you can do is apply a little bit of water first. Again, I'll use my flat brush with clean water, like that, and just apply it all over the paper. Again, the same way. Like that's why you want to add just enough pigment, not super pigmented layers of paint, but just very light, and just apply it gently over the whole paper. Not whole paper, the whole sky area, just gently. Again, just enough to cover it, to make it more shiny. I reapply a little bit of water, like that. So very even, like not pools gathered here on the edge where the horizon line is. Have your paper towel in hand. Use your smaller brush. You might need to remove the water from the building, so dab it off a little bit so there's no water anymore on the building. And then what we can do is just can see how it spreads out. It's too much water on the brush and on the paper. You don't need this amount of water. So remove excess moisture from the brush using your paper towel. So I'm just using like, I press down the belly of the brush to remove excess moisture. And then we can just kind of like use the leftover pigments and leftover mixture or leftover moisture on the paper to blend out those pigments. And I leave the bottom part empty because I want to apply my more vibrant greens here. But everything that is kind of like in the distance, I'll leave it this way. So kind of like this bluish. And then you can also come back and again remove excess moisture from the brush. Use the same mixture, remove excess moisture, and then you can also like dab in some darker, like a little bit more pigment onto the damper paper like that, just to have variety. So it's not just one perfect wash, but just something like that. What you can also do is you can also add more pigment to it, like for example more blue, ultramarine, again, so you have more pigment. Again, remove excess moisture from the brush, and then again just dab on a few like these more bluish dots here and there. Just adds a little bit more like shadowy effect. Just dab it on, like don't overthink it. But here behind I think behind the building I also added, because then they have this hole here. Just let it blend out like very loosely. If it doesn't blend out too much, clean your brush, remove excess moisture, and just like soften some of the pigments. So just like it just moves a little bit, like some mountains. We create a mountain that's in the back that's not so visible. I mean, you can see in the reference it's a little bit more saturated than what we have here. So you can always, like, if you feel like this is too light, you can always come back to it and create another layer. Or in your next attempt, this is something then you know, okay, this time I need to pay attention that I add enough water or enough pigment, depending on what I'm aiming for. I just need to quickly okay. So I wanted to quickly move my circle. So why is it so cut off? All right, so let me see the chat. Laura says, I like these live sessions. It feels like I'm painting along with you, even if I'm painting something different. Yeah, like I have my watercolor membership, Teal. We have painting parties every month. So this is where you can also join. It's over Zoom, so it's a little bit more, yeah, it's more like intimate, I guess, and more private. And yeah, it's a smaller group also. And everyone can share their paintings in the end. So this is also very fun. All right, so we have our, so again, if you feel like the version is a little too light or too dark, you can always like pay attention to that next time and keep in mind, okay, I need to make it slightly more pigmented or less pigmented depending on the result that you have. But now, because this area might be already like still drying but not dry enough, you might also create blooms here. So what this means that if you continue painting the green parts here, more in the foreground, they will push away the pigments that are behind, like so the mountain. So the mountain is still drying, the pigments are not fully dry, and when we place now watery paint next to it, the watery paint will just push away the pigments and we get uneven results. So to avoid that, we want to blow dry it again, just to make sure everything's completely dry, and then we can work on the foreground, or like the middle ground, or the trees that are in front of the mountain. So I'll mute myself again. All right, so now it's relatively dry, and I will just continue using this little puddle here, and just add more yellow to it. So I can add my cadmium yellow. You can also use lemon yellow. It just tweak it in a way that makes sense. Meaning, if it's too vibrant, make it either more watery or add a different blue to the yellow. In my case, I still want to keep it relatively bluish, but now a little bit more saturated, so just to bring in those trees foreground. So the more pale ones are more in the distance, and then the ones are closer are a little bit more saturated, so they're more vibrant, but they're still in the distance, so we don't want to make them super vibrant or anything like that. So I'm avoiding like super vibrant colors here. So I'm just adding a little bit more cadmium yellow to my mix. Let me see how this looks. So it's a little bit more greenish. I might add a little bit of water because I feel like it might be too creamy. A little bit more ultramarine, just to have a little bit more pigment again, and clean my brush, remove excess moisture, and then cadmium yellow again. Just to have a vibrant green, but it's like not super vibrant. Like it's still relatively subtle, but more vibrant than a muddy green. It's just more subtle, I guess. Now in this case, you can also apply water and just be very like gentle, because like things that are in the distance are usually like more subtle, more blurry lines. So we don't want to paint them in a way that really like looks like it's a cut out collage of things, where we have sky, we have a cut out mountain, a cut out row of trees, but more like they're all kind of blend together, and we play around with how pale they are or how vibrant they are, and also we play with soft edges and hard edges. That's why it's so important to really learn watercolor painting from the ground up, like really understand how watercolor works and what to use when, because then you can create anything you want. So the challenge, again, like make sure to join the challenge. It's free. The registration starts next week, and the challenge starts May 19. So we will every day we'll focus on one element that's important. But because so many people think that this is the most difficult medium, or they can't paint with watercolors because this and that. But if you just focus on the element, like the really key principles, you will see how doable and easy it can be, and fun. Like because then you actually know what you're doing, and you are more in control. You know, like what's happening, and just hope for the best. You actually know, okay, let me see. Okay, it happened because I did this. So next time I make sure that I pay attention to that. Instead of I don't know what happened, like I can't paint. So we don't want that. So that's why I want to make sure you understand how watercolor actually works, so you can be in control of the outcome more. Okay, so what I will do is I'll also apply a little bit of clean water again to the whole area. So I already used a hair dryer. It should be fully dry. Again, I apply clean water all over the whole area again, just gently. Again, I remove the water from the building by lifting off the water from the paper. And then I'll just use this green mixture that I created earlier, that I showed you. This is this more vibrant green, but it's not too vibrant. Remove excess moisture from my brush and just fill in these gaps. So I'll just apply it on top like that. Just move my brush up and down, create like almost like these bubbly shapes, something like that. And the same here on the side. If you notice that things are too dry, just reapply some more water, but don't overthink it. Like you can always like soften certain areas, or just keep it the way it is. Like if it moves up too much, just lift off some of the green that might travel too much. If it's not blending out, just soften the edges a little bit. a clean damp brush. And then I'll add a little bit more blue to the mix here. And use that mixture again, just same way we did the mountain in the back. I'll just dab in some darker dots here and there, just to create like more shadowy parts in that green. Again, I'm not painting details or anything like that. I'm literally just dabbing on shapes. This is all pretty much what landscape is all about, just shapes. Keeping things simple. Here on the bottom, I soften some of that with my clean damp brush. Also, I think in the foreground of the building, we can also add a little bit of trees. So here I'll add a little bit of water onto the building, just a little bit, and just a little bit of green that grows in front of the building. Just dab it on just a little bit. So it's not just like cut out, like it's actually like in our, yeah, the building is part of the greenery. With a clean damp brush, you can soften some of that or lift off some pigments if you feel like it's too much. I also add a little bit more blue to the mix. I wouldn't necessarily use like ultramarine to go straight into the paint because, or on the paper, into my painting, because that might be too much. I would rather mix it in and then add it to my painting. Here again, I'm just adding more darker solutions of paint. Just dab it on. And you can also add like trees. So for example, here I just use this dark bluish green and draw trees. So the same way, like a line up and then wiggle my way down like that. And also like because the frame that I'm showing you is slightly like, I mean, I can zoom in my my desk so you can see it better. But the problem is when you see all the details, it feels, then you get caught up in too much detail. So that's why the reference is tiny. My painting that I'm showing is slightly small. So I don't want you to feel like you need to capture every detail. But let me see if I can zoom in a little bit for you, so you see it a little bit better. Or like maybe here, without losing too much of the quality. And then add the trees here also. Here again, here also you want to make sure that you don't just use black and paint the trees like with black paint. You just use very set, like depending on how far or how close the trees are, you make them more paler, maybe more bluer. If they're closer, you make them more vibrant, more saturated. But you're not you're not just like assume things. Like this is one of the videos I did. Like we don't want to paint something that we assume. We want to paint like what we see. And we might assume, yeah, the tree is green, but then we choose just some green. But we also want to pay attention to, okay, what kind of green that is. Is it more yellowish? Is it more bluish? Is it pale? Is it more more like darker and saturated? Also with shapes, like we can assume, okay, this is how it looks. But then is it actually like this way, or do we assume it looks? Our brain likes to just kind of like add the missing pieces, and that might not be accurate at all. You can also draw like some cypresses, or what's the word? I don't want to butcher the name. Just like some lines. You can also add like some smaller, darker details. Also add a little bit more blue to my mix, ultramarine mix, to darken my green. And I can also add some darker tree here or some darker details. And I'm not using black, I'm just using more saturated, more pigmented solutions of paint. Because it's just green, just further away. And this on the right, I don't want to add too much here because the focal point is really just the building and the field. So we don't necessarily need to follow like the whole details on the side. Here I soften this a little bit just to blend it together with the bottom part. And then we can always like come back and once we have more details finished, we can look at, okay, what needs tweaking, what is there something we forgot about. And also with the trees, make sure you are separating them differently. So meaning, we tend to make everything even, perfect, and then it just looks less realistic. So when you paint trees, make sure you space them out differently. So don't create a fence of trees. Everything is the same height, the same spacing. Break them apart, make one tree smaller, taller, space them out differently so there is variety and not like evenly spaced out everything and everything the same height. Just make it more uneven, and we don't necessarily see it immediately. Sometimes we need to catch ourselves and pay attention to, oh, wait a second, this is too even here. I need to make it less even, make it more messy. But this is where you then need to step back and come back to it and see it a little bit more with clear head and eyes. Because sometimes we paint and then just don't see it. Maybe here I could add some old tree. Okay, I think that's good enough. Let me check on you in the chat. Dakota says, I just started watercolor recently and I had no idea what to do, but it's so fun. I've learned a lot from you already in this video. Thank you. That's I'm glad to hear that. Jamaica says, I just want to ask, does watercolor really don't get smudges on once it dries, even if you brush it on again with a flat brush that has water? It can be smudged if you use too much pigment right away. So that's why when you watercolor, it's important to know how to use watercolor correctly, because if you use it like acrylics with pasty, a lot of pigment, and almost like squeeze out the tube and then you start painting with that paint, then yes, if you then apply water on top, it will start smudging because you use too much pigment and you reactivate all these pigments. But when you use it a very diluted solution of paint, like with the sky, for example, the mountains in the sky, the mountains that are here that we painted here, you saw how many times I layered the water and paint and nothing really changed and happened because it's such a very watery solution. So there's not many pigments, so the pigments are relatively in the fiber, dry, and they stuck in the paper. But if I would apply water now over all these dark trees, then yeah, I might smudge them if I'm not careful and don't use a soft brush and things like that. I can easily smudge them. But also, like, you want to make sure, even if you use pale, like only like paint with lighter washes and like very little pigment, there are also variations in the characteristics of watercolor. That's why watercolor paints, that's why it's important to also read the labels of your supplies. So if you use paint, watercolor, pens, tubes, no matter what, you want to see, is it a staining color? Is it not staining? Because if it's a staining color, it means that once you apply it onto the paper, it's not as, you don't lift it off as easily, you don't reactivate it as easily. So this is another layer of making sure that you don't smudge the paint. But yeah, that's a good question also. Let me zoom out. So this is how it looks as slightly zoomed out. Now the other thing is, now since we have our backgrounds, we have our trees, it's too early to go into our building and add all these details there. What we can do is we can now focus on the lavender field and yeah, start creating that in a lush, fun way, in textured way. So what I'll do is, we want to start with color mixing, so we have everything prepared. Now this green we could reuse also as we paint, but I want to create a purple mix first, And you can, I mean, again, I'm not following the reference to the T where I have the brownish pathway, some greenery here. You can totally do that. But remember, when you paint something, you get to decide like what exactly am I trying to capture here? Why did I choose this reference? Why do I want to paint that? Is there something specific that I really like? And for me, I really like that we can see the differences in the mountains and the trees and just the layout of things. But I also like the fact that lavender fields are these lush, beautiful flowers that are like full of, like, if you have a white field, they're just like everywhere and just beautiful. So I don't need to paint all the details of everything. My goal is to capture the lushness of it all. And if I just start aiming trying to capture all the details, I might lose that. But if this is something that you want to capture, like really hyper realistic and making sure you capture this detail, then yeah. So it's really up to you. When you paint, we have a reference to, like, first of all, like, why did you choose the reference and what exactly are you capturing? What do you want to translate? What do you want others to see when they see your painting? What exactly did you want to capture? And just focus on that. Like, you don't need to capture all the details, capture every little detail and everything that you see in the reference. Maybe it's just the color, maybe it's just the composition of the picture, maybe it's just the weather, maybe it's the feeling that you get when you see this location. Maybe you want to share the joy, the good vibes of whatever you're painting. Not tell, okay, this is the building, the shelf of this element is this way, and then this is this. But you capture the overall essence of what you want to share with the world. So, and in this case, I want to capture like the purple lushness. And in the last video, in the last episode of this series, I showed you some tips and tricks how you can capture that. So we will use that here as well. So first we want to mix the color, and I will use my bigger brush, so number 8, Silver Velvet brush number 8. I'll start with a small puddle again in my mixing well. And I want to aim for like this reddish purple, not super blue, but more like pinkish. So I'll start with some pink. This is my Kodachrome Rose. And then I'll add, so this is, if I can show you here, this is the pinkish version of a red color. And then I use ultramarine again and add it here as well. So this is how it looks. So this will be a more bluish purple. If I add more pink to it, I'll turn it to a more reddish purple. And this mixture is great for, you can see how dark and pigmented it is. This is what I will use for the rose and some darker details. So that's why I use some of that I just mixed, transfer it to my next well, my second well here, and then just add some water to it because I want to have a lighter version of that same color. Something like that. And again, we will use wet on wet, but I'll have a watery solution of paint and a more saturated solution of paint, so more pigment. One has more water than pigment, the other has more pigment than water. And we will, like I showed in the last episode, we will apply clean water first. Just focus on just the general color scheme and texture, and then add the rose on top with a darker, more saturated, concentrated solution of paint, just to create those rows. And from there you can play around with texture, details, and things like that. Let me just check on you again, the chat. Linda says, I love hearing your thinking process and how and why you make the decisions you do. Yeah, that's why it's so important. That's why I teach watercolor painting the way I'm teaching it, because there's so many like how to do things and what to do things, but if no one tells you like why are you choosing or why you're doing this, you can't really replicate that. That's why inside my watercolor membership and also in the paint to paper challenge, I walk you through like the whys behind everything, because then you know, okay, I need to choose this color because if I choose the other one, I will get not the result that I want. Or I need to do this because I'm going for this effect. That's why I need to do this. Because if you just follow someone's tutorial and you don't understand why you're doing this, you just follow and yeah, you get a nice result. But then, okay, how can I paint by myself? And then if you don't know what you're doing and why you're doing certain things, it's harder for you to create something on your own because you don't know the reasons behind it. So that's why no matter what class you join, like my goal is to always like walk you through the whys, the not just how and what, but also the why of the steps, and also about of watercolor, so you know exactly like what to do, why to do, how, and things like that, so you can create your own paintings with confidence and ease, not just like again panic and just be feeling frustrated because nothing works, and then you just think about like maybe it's just me not talented enough, which is not the case. You just need to understand how watercolor works, what you focus on, how things work, and why things are the way they are, and what you do, and everything will become much more easy. Thanks for sharing your Sunday with us. I'm enjoying the hangout. I suck at watercolor, but it is a beautiful and challenging medium. Yeah, that's the fun part. Like I think the challenge, the learning, figuring things out. This is where you grow. Like if everything will be easy, everything just flawless, everything is perfect, like you won't have any drive, I think, to get better or improve things, because yeah, like yeah, I mean, it's just the fun part. Maybe it's just I just love learning and getting better at things and improving and growing, and also enjoying the process. And also once I figure things out, I can enjoy now the what I achieved in understanding things like that, and then I can continue like evolving and learning more. All right, so let's start with the field. So again, I'll start with the clean water on my big flat brush, and this time I only apply the water to the bottom part here, so the 2/3, and I keep an eye on that I don't go too much into my dark trees, because we want the lavender field to be relatively light in the back and more saturated in the foreground. So we again move things more to the distance. So we have almost more colors in the foreground, and then in the distance they're a little bit more paler. Again, multiple times, like depending on where you are, my things dry very fast. So apply the water multiple times. It will just give the paper time to absorb some of the moisture. And then once you apply again a little bit more water, then you have even more water to work with, and also more time to paint. So if you just apply once and then start painting, things just dry too fast, and then you don't have as much time to shape things, to add things, tweak things if needed. Okay, so also make sure that you don't have too much water. So if you see like pools gathering on the bottom of your tape, soak it up. That's why I have my tape underneath my paper, so the water moves down and not in all the directions. And then I'll start with my watery solution of paint, and I start at the bottom, so then I can almost create like a gradient from saturated purple to a lighter purple. And just almost create a gradient just to apply the paint. If you want to make it more bluish, I don't know, I kind of like this color, so I will keep it. But if you want to make it more bluish, just add more blue to the mix. And I just gradually go up, color all the way to the horizon line, something like that. And then I can continue like adding some of the some textures. Like there are some more concentrated, like more bushy, like clusters of purple. So here, again, with watercolors, things dry. They look drier than they when they like the colors look lighter and more paler when they dry. So we also don't want to make it too pale right away. So keep an eye on how much or how little pigment you use. So rather, you want to start with light, but at the same time, keep in mind that things will look lighter when they dry. So make sure it's not too pale. So kind of like that. So just like I'm just building in the texture. Lighter areas, darker areas. Still the lighter part is in the back. And then the more saturated in the foreground. And then with the more concentrated solution of paint, we can add some darker areas also here in the foreground. Just some dabbing it on just to create texture like we did last week. If you watched it, just so it's not even, like we want texture. And then I will switch, I think, to a smaller brush. So this is a number 6 now. And I still use the same creamy consistency of paint. And now I aim towards my vanishing point. Again, you probably don't see your outlines that you added to the paper. You might still see some lines on the tape. If not, that's okay as well. Just look at the reference roughly and see where they are. And then just use the pigmented solution of paint to start drawing those rows. Starting from the edges. If you see like some of the paints like spreads out like that, means just there's too much water on the paper and the brush. Just pick up some of the pigments again. Again, control the amount of water on the brush and aim towards that vanishing point here. Starting from the outside, and then you can see here that was too much water, so it's spread out. So you can just lift it off. You can soften some of those areas. Also, I feel like this is too watery still, so I'm adding more pigment to my mix. So more pink, more blue. So more like darker, creamy consistency of paint. Again, still remove excess moisture just in case. Again, I start adding more pigment starting from the sides. You can also just dab it on. So just not just like drawing, but like dab it on so you have like a Morse code type of texture. Just to have a little bit of variety and texture. Here again, around here, this is where the lines become more horizontal. I clean my brush again. Just use some leftover pigments because here I don't want them to be super visible. That's why I'm trying to make them relatively pale and less visible. And then what we can do is, once the paper dries a little more, you can also, again, remove excess moisture from the brush and then just kind of like adding some of the more definition here in the back, just a little bit, just where the vanishing point starts, to kind of add some of that, of these rows, because they can get lost if we just start from the back and then go up. So we can reintroduce some definition in the back as well, but without like making it super visible. And this is again where you really want to make sure that you know the different drying stages of the paper. So in the challenge, in the paint to paper challenge, we talk more about like how to make sure you don't get patchy results and like what to pay attention to and why. And So if you get like blooms and patchy results, it's not your fault. Like we can fix that. So, and then we can use, like I showed you last week, you can use the brush to almost like draw with this motion, like scribbly lines like that. You go move your brush up and down, and change it from left to right, so you have this feathery shape that the lavender fields often have, without like drawing it perfectly. You are messy, because this will help you to make it more interesting. I also use some of the watery solution, because then we can add like some texture. So I'm just drawing here, and you also make the pattern slightly more messy. I need more pigment, so I add more blue, more pink to it, so more creamy consistency of paint. Again, remove excess moisture from the brush, and then start the process. This is how often I paint also the grass and things like that, fields, because it's just like, because if you start painting every single detail, you need to really be good at doing that, because oftentimes we tend to make it too perfect, and then it actually doesn't look as natural. It just looks, you really tried hard instead of actually capturing the looseness and everything like that, or like the details. Because sometimes even like the lines, like if you draw the lines too perfect and straight, they just look less interesting and professional than if you make them more wonky. Like it's, I know it's counterintuitive, but somehow it's just how things often are. Again, more darker paint here. Earlier we had this green, so if you want to add some of the green, you can also use that and add it into the rose, for example, or even like use it as your darker version to darken some elements with that mix. I'll also sprinkle some water. For that, I'll use a smaller brush, even smaller than that. So a liner brush, for example. And I'll sprinkle, I think I use this paper here and just sprinkle some water here on top. Because the top part of my field is already too dry. And I get probably too much of, like the texture will be too much. And then with water, you can also do this with water. Draw with water, like I showed you last week. And again, like if you want to darken certain elements, like you can also use the liner brush, more pigments. You can also of course like follow the reference more closely and add like some more different rows and how it's structured. Here, I wouldn't touch the top part, because this is already too dry. You can see it by how shiny it is. So if it's not shiny enough, like relatively pale and matte, then you can tell it's already too dry. It's the danger zone. If you have a flat brush, you can also use that clean damp brush and soften like any edges around the horizon if you want. Like for example, if the line is too harsh, you can soften it, but this is where you really need to be careful, otherwise you get patchy results. But this is just another tool that you can use to make it more interesting and like less even, because otherwise if we have hard edges, it just looks like we cut it out and then distract. So the dark colors are more in the foreground, and then the paler versions are in the distance. We have these feathered out rows that I showed you last week. They're sparkly. And again, don't worry about like making the painting perfect. Like paint whatever happens on paper, let it be happening, and just finish the painting. And then from there you can always like look at it and see, okay, this was too pale, this was too colorful, too dark, too light, and maybe the composition doesn't click for you, maybe you can change something, and just improve on that. Like really look at what really worked, what you really like, what exactly do you like, how did you achieve that. Keep that in mind, and then analyze like, okay, this is something I think I need to tweak because I don't like how blah blah blah, it's too light, too pale, too I don't know, something. And then next time you pay attention to that and improve on that, because we it's unrealistic. It's to just hope that everything will be perfect right away. It's not. It's part of the process to have a messy first painting that doesn't look like anything. It's messy, that doesn't spark joy at all, but you at least put pen to paper and now have something to work with. Like there's so many, like in music and writing and like art, everyone creates this just like millions of different failed attempts, but they all move them closer to the masterpiece. So don't beat yourself up if the painting didn't turn out right away the way you wanted it. It's just, you just one step further. So like celebrate that you put pen to paper, painted something, that you have something to work with, and celebrate the elements that you really liked, and look at what you can improve. And that's why it's important to also know, like I always say, to understand how watercolor works and what goes into the painting process. So it's easier for you to even like paint intentionally and troubleshoot. So if you don't know what's going on and why things happen, then it's hard to improve, because you're just like, well, I hate that. It doesn't look good. Like I don't like it. But what exactly? Like what happened? So understanding the principles, like how watercolor works and things like that, it really helps to actually improve, because you know how to achieve that in the first place. So when you try it again, you know exactly how to tweak things, because you know what's going on and why things happened the way they happened. Yeah, also like you can also use, I also brought white gouache. So what you can do is use opaque paint like white gouache and sprinkle that on top, like either just straight from the tube, like just white like that. Just need more water here. Or you can mix it with your leftover purple. Just to make it slightly, not just white, just have actually some color in it. Or you can just also mix a very dark solution of your purple and blue and things like that. Maybe some leftover colors that you can mix in, some water, so you can actually sprinkle it and sprinkle on top as well. Here, just here in the foreground, because everything else is pretty dry, so I don't want to have too many elements distracting. So we have a little bit more lushness here. If you want to reuse some of the paper here and paint something, you can just clean that if they have sprinkled something on top. Okay. And I'll just let it dry, like until at least some of it is more, yeah, like not so shiny anymore, and then we can come back and add some details to the building. So Adi says, just curious if you also have a mentor whom you learn from, as everything looks so perfect with your watercolor painting. Also love to know what areas you're focusing upon to improve your watercolor journey. Yeah, like I've been like learning from different, like not currently, like I when I just started, like I tried different teachers. Like one of my favorites is Sergei Kurbatov, and I just love how like this style, like it's so glowy, and this is where I was like, okay, this is something that really speaks to me. I want to create art that is also like glowy and like full of life, that is like almost like the painting is breathing. So I took a lot of lessons from him in the past, and in the beginning nothing really worked. Like was a disaster, and this is where I then had to really dig deep into how watercolor works, get to the bottom of things, because in the beginning, yes, I had mentors and teachers, but I didn't get the same results like they did, because I just didn't understand, like, why are you choosing this color? Why do you do this? Like, and I just followed, and yeah, sometimes it worked out, sometimes it didn't, but I wanted to have consistent results. So that's why I had like a really whole phase like years ago where I just really like really wanted to get to the bottom of everything, like how watercolor works, how mixing color mixing works, everything. And once I understood like what actually goes into the painting process, color mixing, and everything around it, everything started to click. And this is where I also started to teach watercolor painting. And this is where I brings me the most joy, showing people how it works and how they can achieve their own beautiful watercolor paintings. Because yeah, you can buy all the books with color recipes, but unless you understand like I don't like yeah, they're fun and pretty and stuff like that, but it's just a formula book, and if you don't understand like what you're doing and why, then it's just like looking at a formula book and just randomly, aimlessly doing things. But I still learn, still practice, and whenever I teach a class, it's not like I have everything immediately perfect. I still practice, still figure out how can I make, no, okay, this looks great, but how can I improve on that? Maybe this is a complete disaster, how can I make it better? So it's not like I sit down and everything's amazing. I have multiple attempts, and then the final results after 5 attempts is what I'm happy with. I know it could be better, but I'm happy with the way it is now. And I know maybe in 5 years I will be even better than that. But at the same time, the goal is not to chase like some perfect mastered skill or anything like that. It's more like just fine-tuning what you can already do, and finding or developing your own kind of way of painting or translating the reference, and yeah, kind of like zoning in into how you want to paint, and can always improve, and always not even improve but develop as you develop as a person. Maybe in the past, maybe you painted very vibrant and very abstract, and then somehow after years you ended up on a path, ended up, it feels sounds negative, but more like I didn't mean this way. You just like your path followed you to painting more realistic, hyper realistic, more like different colors and things like that, different way how you painted. So it's like, yeah, it's just a journey. That's why I always say like the fun is in the journey, and in the learning, and in exploring, and not just like reaching a certain point, because the point when you reach it is like 5 seconds, and then you kind of already move on to the next thing. And it's like, yeah, I just that you want to enjoy the process. And I still like, I learn the most when I paint it, and like really like figure things out, like how I want to have this reference, I really want to make it work, how can I do it? And then first attempt is horrible, nothing works, and then I change or tweak one element. Okay, this looks better now. Okay, what else can I change and tweak? So this is the fun part of everything. Tarfa says, yeah, I have a video on my palette. On my channel, like how to set up your watercolor palette. I walk you through all the colors that I have. But you don't necessarily have the same colors. Like it's when you get a standard set of watercolors, you get similar colors. You have warm and cool yellows, warm and cool reds, warm and cool blues, greens. So you probably have ultramarine. You don't need all the colors. These are the colors that I somehow kind of like worked myself into it, because before I had just random tubes, and I noticed that I use certain colors more than others, and I just like put them the colors I really like kept using, I put them in my palette. But sometimes I notice, okay, I still don't use this color much, so maybe next time I just remove it. Like also, like, let's add some details to the building now that this part is slightly pretty dry, I think. Just need to make sure I clean my brush. And I can reuse some of that brown that I had here from the raw sienna. And I will use my burnt umber. So burnt umber is also a very standard color. Burnt umber is just this brownish color, brown earthy color. I can mix it into my raw sienna. So raw sienna is this yellowish earthy. So yellow ochre, for example, is so similar. So we aim for a earthy brown color. And what I can do is also I can apply clean water to my building, just lightly. Just like that, just a little bit. And then the clean damp brush loaded with the pigments. And I can then add some of the roof wet on, kind of like wet on damp, or damp on damp, because it's in the distance, and I try to get the look of it being in the distance. So if I paint it wet on dry, the roof, the line, everything, it might look too cut out. Like if you do that, it's also like not like you can still do that. It's not like it makes the painting worse or anything like that. It's just like another tool that you can just help the painting look a little bit more, yeah, not necessarily realistic, but more like fit with everything around. Like we have distant mountains and different elements, so you can add them like that. So again, the windows. Again, don't use them to don't make them too like don't use. I wouldn't use like you can of course do whatever you want, but like if you paint them too like with black, they might be too. Yeah, it might stand out too much and don't fit with the rest. Like even here, I might like even pick up some of those pigments to make them lighter. And also the roof, like the lines are just too distracting. I blend them in together a little bit by now smudging them with a little bit of water, because if there's too much contrast, it feels like it's just distracting. I'm just kind of blurring and making them a little bit messy in the distance. And again, like if you paint it, because it's such a small painting, it's hard to add all the details. But that's why it's the good part of painting something like that, because you don't get caught up in too many details. You kind of capture, okay, this is the colors, this is the vibe I'm going for, this is what I'm aiming for. And then once it's larger, you can then, okay, this is this is the building, this is the light coming from this one part, this is a little bit darker here, I need to make even on this part. But in this case, because it's relatively small, it's hard to add all the details, so don't worry about it. I'll also want to add a little bit of trees here in the foreground after all. Just need to make sure that my blue, because I have so much purple mixing here, my blue is a little mixed with my pink. Maybe here some more trees. Just build it in with the rest because it felt like a little empty after all. So something like that. You can also reuse some of the opaque white, for example, and add it onto the roof. I mean, this is such a small painting. It's hard to add all the details, but if it's like a larger painting, you can then add maybe some white highlights here and there on the painting somewhere, but making sure it doesn't stand out too much and distracts. can also sprinkle some white on top. Now it's just on the drier side. You can see if you don't mix the colors too much, you get these more lines. But again, like this is where I wouldn't overwork it. This is where when you notice that you're saying, okay, maybe I should do this, maybe I can do that, and then this is where it's for me it's usually a sign to just walk away, because otherwise I overwork it and make it less, I wouldn't say worse, but it's not the loose result that could have been. I can remove the tape here just to see how it looks without it. Let's remove the tape here. I will reapply this one later, but I just wanted to show you how it looks now. I mean, I can apply the tape back once everything is dry and paint more versions. Like you don't need to remove them if you paint more later, just so you can see the result that we have now. So this is just a small study, and there's just a small simple version of the reference. You can of course make it more advanced and add more green, maybe more details, more buildings and things like that. But the point was not to create a whole perfect copy of the reference. It's more about just finding ways to get creative and easing yourself into a reference that might feel intimidating or unsure. How can I paint that? Where do I even start? Starting small is a great way, because then you can have 4 different or 2 different versions that you can play around with, and then decide, okay, I think I need to tweak this next time. This didn't work out the way I wanted. This is too dark. This is too light. This is too much of things. If you paint the whole painting, then you already used up the whole painting, the whole paper here, and you might need to start another one. And here you can paint 4 or 2, depending on the size of the paper. So it says, thanks, Miko. I must say you have such a great clarity of thoughts. Thank you. Yeah, so this is the result from now. Like you can, like I said, you can always paint it again. These blobs I kind of smudged away because they were like, didn't work out. This was the point where I should have stopped, but I didn't. But yeah, it's just like another thing where you can, okay, next time I should not overwork it. It's just find clues when you paint, like what's a sign I should stop. And for me, it's like when I start thinking, maybe I should do this, maybe I should do that, instead of just letting it be. Yeah, so again, like make sure that yeah, just not overthinking, just put pen to paper. And if you need help to just get started, to really learn how watercolor works and what it takes to create your own watercolor paintings with confidence and ease, then make sure to join the Paint to Paper challenge here. This is the link. Also, here's the link to the challenge in the chat. And this is also where we also talk about, okay, how watercolor works and how to paint in a way that where you don't need to draw, like so many things in watercolor paintings you don't need to draw. You can just use just a few simple tips and tricks that simplifies everything. You can also learn all about like where to start, like how to make sure that you don't use watercolor like acrylics, how to avoid any patchy results, or how do you achieve certain results on purpose and not so much by accident, so you can actually recreate those results. And yeah, and on 5-day we also paint a simple but beautiful landscape with like moonlight or sunlight, depending on what you want to paint, and the mountains. And glittery water and trees, and I will show you how to do them. Like in this case, I really showed you just like a simplified version of things, but then I get into everything in much detail, like in how to paint certain elements and how to keep it simple while making it more realistic. So registration starts on Monday, and the challenge starts May 19th, and it's for 5 days. And I hope to see you all there. Maybe some of you joined last time, maybe some heard here from the first time. But yeah, I'm super excited about the challenge. Mary Hartman says, you are one of my favorite watercolor teachers on YouTube. You have a wonderful way of teaching, and I love to watch you paint. Thank you for sharing your talent with us. Thanks for joining today. Celia says, wetness and paint consistency while following along is very challenging. The best thing I can say about my painting is that it is a great starting point for improvement. Yeah, like as I said, like it's better to have something like something on paper that you can work with than nothing. Like if you overthink, look for the perfect reference and overthink, oh, what if it doesn't work out? Like, what should I start? Maybe I should, I don't know, maybe I don't know, or just maybe it's start tomorrow, and then 5 years later you still haven't started. That's why the challenge is also great for that, where you can really just focus on small things that make a huge difference, and then you can have something to work with where you can say, okay, this turned out because I used too much water, too little water. And also the challenge is pre-recorded, so it's not live sessions. They're not 2 hours long. They're between 10 and 30 minutes, I think max, like 10 to 30 minutes. Some are just 10, some are just 20. And we just focus on one thing each day, and you can watch them at any time. So you can literally just pause, watch, or just like paint and watch what happens on the paper, continue watching. So it's not a live stream. So, I mean, live streams are also fun. Here it's really, I wanted to make it bite-sized and really, talk about what most important. Otherwise I will start talking and like, chatting about all the things. The 5-day challenge is everything's recorded, so every day one video is released, and you can watch it during the days through the whole week, or catch up on the weekend, like as because it's from Monday to Friday, and then on the weekend you can also watch it. And do you have any questions before I head out? The recordings will be, of course, from this live stream will be up on my YouTube channel. You can rewatch it. I'm not sure, like I think on Facebook something changed, and they actually removed the recordings somehow after a month. So make sure that you watch it in time before it disappears. This is the only thing that you want to keep an eye on. But if there's no any other questions, make sure to join the challenge starting May 19th. Registration opens tomorrow, so on Monday, and I hope to see you all there. Or if not in the challenge, I hope to see you in another live class or membership, in my Teal membership. You can also join there as well. So here is, if you want to learn more about membership, here is another link to just join the notification list, so you know exactly when you can join it and learn more about it. So have a wonderful rest of your weekend, wonderful rest of your Sunday, or maybe the day just started, so you can just watch the recording if you're just joining us, and paint. And once you paint it, I hope you will also share it on social, and tag me so I can see it. And I hope you will share it so I can see what you painted, and maybe you painted something else as you were listening to what I was chatting about. Have a wonderful rest of your day, evening, morning, weekend, and I'll see you